Okay, I am super excited for this interview. We have two very special guests today with us to discuss this book that's sitting here on this music stand. This is A Sight for Sore Eyes, Volume 2. This is a book about the band The Residents, and this is an incredible work of art. If you're unaware about this project, like I said, it's Volume 2. I've got Volume 1 here. And on the channel, Make Weird Music, we have an interview with Homer, and I believe Aaron, we did some stuff too as well. But you can learn all about the book on those videos, or just go to melodicvirtue.com and you'll get to learn all about these projects. Really amazing presentation of work directly from the residents' archives. So let's do some introductions. We've got Aaron Tanner here. Aaron runs Melodic Virtue. Aaron, you want to share a little about yourself and the work that you do?
Graphic designer by trade for the last 25 years, and about 7 years ago decided to start compiling pictorial histories of underground bands. I noticed no one else was really doing it, and I've learned why financially, but but other than that, it's been great.
Great. And then we have Homer Flynn here from the Cryptic Corporation, and Homer helps to run a lot of the creative stuff that the residents do. Homer, thanks so much for joining today.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here, Anthony.
Awesome. So we've got Volume 2 here, and I love this book because this is the era that I sort of grew up on. Um, there's stuff in here from Cube E, from the 20 Twisted Questions Laserdisc. There's so much wonderful, rich art from what I feel is, I don't know, sort of the most mysterious time in the Residents' output, because I feel like this is when the Residents started getting really musical and getting better at making music and getting better at, honing their artistic capabilities as well. Homer, I'd love to hear your perspective on the era presented in this book.
Well, I kind of touch on all the eras at one time or another, and I certainly feel like what's in this book. I mean, when I thumbed through it myself, it was kind of like it took my breath away. Oh my gosh, all that really happened. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting time for the residents. It touches on the CD-ROM era, which was very brief, just because CD-ROMs didn't weren't really around very long. But at the same time, it for visuals, it was an incredibly rich time, because we, and particularly me as an art director, were able to work with a huge, wide range of very talented artists, and that was a lot of fun for me. I'm a collaborator by nature, so I really enjoy working with other people.
Aaron, can you talk about what era, what is covered in this book from start to finish? You know it probably more intimately than anyone else.
Yes, so it starts just directly after the Mole Show. Um, after there were some change ups in the lineup, and goes all the way through to, I believe, 1997, Disfigured Night, which was, from what I understand, another point in the band's career that was where they were starting to wonder if they should hang it up or not, much like after the Mole Show.
And a lot of this touches on the sort of foray into digital art and performance. We get to see the residents sort of transition out of purely analog work and then into sort of mixed media and fully digital. Homer, I'd love to hear your take on that sort of technological transition as the art director.
Well, I certainly had my own transition in there. I always tell people the first 20 years or close to it, of my work with the residents was all fully analog. And then from the early to the mid 90s, it's been digital. And I have mixed feelings in a way about both. I mean, there's nothing when it comes to artifacts. There's nothing like the leftover stuff from analog. Weird photos that weren't quite exposed right, and one thing after another. And the artifacts of digital are hard drives or CDRs or whatever. They're not very glamorous. But then in terms of working tools, well, you can't really beat digital tools, just the flexibility, the ease of use. And I feel like the residents are a lot the same way. They were never really very good musicians. Uh, so, I mean, part of their charm is how they were able to take that kind of a combination of ignorance and naivete and blend it into a sound that had a lot of charm and interest to it. But then as they ultimately moved more into digital, as you were saying, they were able to start really perfecting. No, I won't say perfecting. I'm not a perfectionist, but they were hone their skills in a way that was very satisfying to everybody.
Aaron, what did you experience going through the archives with Homer, and what was your process for this? Because I remember when we did last interview about the first book, you said some of the digital artifacts you had were like postage size little things because that's how many pixels there were back then. Like, could you talk about the difference between the first book and the second book in terms of assembly and creative the analogs and what source material you were able to use?
Thankfully, with this book, there was still a lot of like actual physical material. Even magazines and just handwritten notes and all of that kind of stuff. Things that are obviously very interesting. Um, but whenever I was in San Francisco going through the cryptic archives, brought an assistant with me just because I know how massive the amount of stuff is there. And yeah, I would just have one guy on the scanner and just start digging through cardboard box after cardboard box, making piles around him for him to scan. And when he's done, I put him back in the box and bring him another pile. So it was nice to be able to sort through all those things and then have someone digitize them, so I didn't have to, you know, spend all my time doing that. Um, but in terms of like the fidelity of different things, it was pretty interesting. Just because, again, there, like you've said, there was that transition. Um, you know, uh, Digital stuff I didn't really have to dig through. Um, Thankfully, Homer was able to just provide all that for me on a drive. Uh,
So you weren't using like an old, Mac 2CX or something, an external CD-ROM drive to import this stuff.
no, but I did use some old emulators to make screen captures from the CD-ROM games.
Yeah, so it kind of raises the question. Maybe this is one for Homer. How how big are the archives? Like, I constantly see we are selling stuff from the archives, and I'm like, wow, they must have. You sent stuff to museums around the world. There's constantly stuff and new stuff, undiscovered stuff coming from the archives. The book comes with an unreleased single. Like, how big are these archives? Can you give us a sense of like, is there some warehouse somewhere, or is it just really tightly packed, or what's going on there?
Well, the warehouse is actually my storage room back over here. But what happened, which I have to say I was not very happy about at the time. Hardy had been the keeper of the music archives, uh, both tapes and physical product. And when he announced his retirement, and ultimately I wound up doing a deal with Cherry Red Records in London and MVD in Philadelphia. And so they each bought Hardy's half of the Cryptic Corporation. And once all that was done, he announced, well, okay, you have to come up and get the archives now. And it was 100 boxes. And I had to hire a truck and 3 guys to go and move all that stuff down here. You know, I have a nice studio down here. It's this is the basement of my wife and I own a small apartment building here, and this is the basement. I joke and say that next time there's an earthquake, our building is going to hold up the entire neighborhood because we had to do all this replacement of concrete down here. But in the process of doing it, but we had, it's a 100-year-old building. Moisture was rotting out all the foundation, the stuff that didn't rot out, the termites were getting. But anyway, in the process of doing that, I built a nice studio and had a nice archive storage space. And that storage space just went like that. All of a sudden, it was all gone. And I'm, fuck, shit, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Well, as it turned out, of that 100 boxes, about 25 of them were tapes. And, one of the really great things we've done in the past few years is that Cherry Red has initiated this amazing back catalog re-release series. And the real gems in that re-release series are all the stuff that's on those tapes. And it's like alternate versions of things. It's songs that didn't quite make it, live thing, just all this material. And so it's been it's been a godsend in a way, in a lot of ways, just being able to create these really rich sets. I mean, I think maybe somebody mentioned the QB show, and I think Cherry Red did a 9 CD set on QB. I mean, there was just that's an extreme, but there was just that kind of material in there.
I spent some time with the book last night and came across, speaking of QB, just came across just some of the great material in here. Let's see. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it up real quick. Oh, here we go. So this QB material, and the visuals are just like kind of terrifying and incredible. And this was just a part of what the residents were doing. I was so astounded at the visual and the musical creativity going on. And then flipping through the book, I noticed there's so much stuff about like the American Composer Series, obviously George and James, but you've done Aaron Copland. The single in the book is a cover, or at least the first half of the single is a cover. And it seems like, and I think you mentioned this in your note about Hardy's passing on the Residence website. He was a real fan of the blues and a lot of like American music. Sometimes I hear the Elvis stuff. Sometimes I hear, the James Brown stuff. And I wonder, like, the Residence has a history of sort of mocking that kind of music. But is the American Composer Series, the QB stuff, the Elvis stuff that was going on at that time, is it like a satirical take, or is it an authentic, like, I think you said in one of our interviews, creativity is like letting life pass through you and you put your stamp on it. Is that what was going on with the Residents with, a lot of this American music?
That's certainly my take on it for the most part. I mean, the Residents have a love-hate relationship really with American culture. And they really were paying homage to the stuff that they liked. I mean, if their abilities were so meager that it sounded like satire, well, that's okay too. But and I'm not going to say this. There's always been humor in what the Residents did, but seldom, maybe It's interesting because he just died a few days ago. Inagata Devita from Third Reich and Roll. I think maybe that was blatantly satirical, but not that much of their output is, like I say, it's as much in honor of as anything else.
Yeah, because the performance of Teddy Bear is, to me, one of the greatest musical accomplishments. And I just watched the Residents' performance of it from just a few years ago. It was in Europe. Uh, Still carrying on the tradition of, some of the American composers and American blues rock music, pop music. So it's funny because when you listen to the Residents' music, that influence is not obvious. But when I listen to the covers of that music, um, and I read through this book, I'm like, wow, they are a very American music band. Although, just on the surface, you would never discover it.
No, I agree with that completely. Um, I mean, at one point they were even doing "We're an American Band," um, but it's funny you should mention Teddy Bear because their point of view was that, I mean, maybe they were making fun of Elvis's interpretation of it, which honestly couldn't have been more lightweight. But from their point of view, there were more interesting interpretations to make of that material, and they saw a valid sort of S&M interpretation of it, and ultimately that's what they did. But once again, from their point of view, that stuff was in the lyrics. Elvis didn't see them, didn't see it, but it was there.
Aaron, I feel like you have such an interesting kind of peek behind the curtain. Obviously, access to art and music that was never released, many different takes or unreleased, photos from sessions. What are some of your takeaways about the Residents, from this era reflected in the book?
Um, I feel that there was so much stuff that was unused that could have been used just because of the quality of it. It may have not been the right image for that project, but there there was a lot of good stuff that didn't quite make the cut, and that always definitely makes for a much more interesting book than me having to doctor a bunch of images to to make them interesting, as I've had to do in the past.
We have a question from, I think it's a fake name here. It's Nam Ahir. I think it means name here. Question for Homer. It says, Hardy was always against releasing pre-Residents material as he didn't feel like it was up to Residents standards. How did you feel about it? And he or she notes, a lot more has been released since Hardy's passing.
Um, I'll be honest and say I had mixed feelings about it. Um, some of that material, I can't say I was terribly happy about it being done. But on the other hand, it was real and it existed and it had historical value. On the other hand, there was other material that when I went back and listened to it that at one point I didn't like, and then I went back and listened to it and I went, well, that's actually okay. Um, so from my point of view, and I find this with so many things that I or the residents have done, it very often, if nothing else, you gain perspective over time, and quite often things gain value over time.
For sure. Homer, there's been a lot of technological progress even since we last spoke. This whole AI thing. We did an interview about NFTs, and that came and went. The residents in this book explored Laserdisc, explored. It looked like you might have been using a video toaster to create some of the art on the Amiga or something like that. It looked.
Yeah,
What's
right.
you were?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
They gave us a video toaster.
What was that?
I said, they gave us a video toaster.
Oh. Yeah, so I just thought like you've got a laser disc, you've got video toaster, you've got Max CD-ROM games, all of this stuff coming out of the Residents. Uh, and nowadays, I know the Residents like were exploring NFTs and stuff, but like I feel like the tools are out there to do pretty much anything now. Virtual reality, are the residents exploring any more modern, newer technologies, or is that kind of like technological exploration a thing of the past?
Um, for me personally, as their art person, as their graphics person, I'm exploring AI image creation quite a bit, and I'm really interested. There's a guy who's a great tech guy that I just exchanged emails with a couple of days ago, asking him about AI video. Um, as far as the residents, I think they are interested in AI music, but that's not something I'm terribly knowledgeable about. But from what I've heard, the AI music stuff doesn't really seem to have come around that much. It's kind of like, well, if you want interesting different variations on bossa nova, um, you can get AI to crank that out for you. But that's not exactly where the residents are at. Um, but I suspect at some point they will be exploring that more.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Aaron, you did originally say there were going to be three, possibly even four of these books. Can you share anything about Volume 3? Has it started yet?
Volume 3 has not started, but I did think it would be kind of funny to skip Volume 3 and go straight to Volume 4 as a bit of an homage to the Mole trilogy.
Right. Yeah, cool.
That's hysterical. What? But like, have you started even thinking about the scope of Volume 3, or do you believe like it's going to take us through present day, or is it like the early 2000s, or what?
No, I was thinking it would probably go up to the point at which Hardy was no longer involved.
Was that like 2010, 2012? I forget when.
Well, he retired at the end of 2015. Uh, but although he has started distancing himself before that, but he officially retired at the end of 2015.
Okay. Okay. Um,
Yeah, with the books, I always try to end them when there's a major shift has happened.
what was the major shift at the end of the Red Book here?
That was the point at which, and Homer can certainly correct me if I'm mistaken, but where the residents were talking about calling it quits, and I believe it was Marlboro cigarettes that saved the group, or at least that's my understanding.
What? What's that story?
I'll let Homer elaborate on that.
Um, well, the residents were, really one of their high points, creatively and in terms of the culture, their exposure in the culture was the CD-ROM era. And they did Freak Show CD-ROM, they did Bad Day on the Midway, they did Gingerbread Man, which had a CD-ROM segment to it, and had proposed their next CD-ROM project, which was to be called "I Murdered Mommy," and um, and then that market just poof disappeared, and um, and what was left of it went to games, purely games, and so the residents they were kind of at a point of like, well, what do we do now? Um, but they then got an offer to play. What was that thing? What was it called? It was a kind of a TV performance at
Fridays?
hmm?
Fridays?
No, TV performance in Munich,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
about 96 or 97, somewhere in there. And they didn't really have anything that they wanted to perform. Um, but the idea kind of got their imagination. And they were working with Molly Harvey at that point, and really wanted to do something with her, and so they then created this piece. It was about a half an hour long, and there was a guy at MTV. His name was John Payson, Payson, and he was. If you remember all those really crazy IDs, interstitial things that were on MTV like back in the 90s. He was the guy who was responsible for all that and was a big Residents fan. And, they talked to him and he was interested in coming over to Munich and doing, directing live this performance that the Residents did. And they wound up doing it 4 times. Like I said, it was only a half an hour long, so they just kept doing it, and then I don't think it went out live. I think they all kind of stayed around the studio and took all 4 versions and edited them all together, and in a way, that just kind of kicked them in the butt and stimulated them towards doing more, and um, ultimately they had also, this is around getting close to the time when they were doing God in Three Persons, and they had thought about doing something live with that, but it just seemed too challenging. And then the idea of Wormwood came up, and the whole idea of, oh my God, the Bible, what a great piece of source material. And then that then kind of took root in their collective imaginations and then kind of took off. And that was then like, at that time, we're up to like 99 and 99, 98 and 99.
We have a question here from, oh, wait, who? Oh, it was also Nama here. Do the Residents have any interest in revisiting Moles, American composers, Bunny Boy, etc.? And I just want to add, I think the Bunny Boy video series was just like incredible video content, and I just could not wait until each new episode came up. All of the stuff about John on the island, I can't remember the name of the island, but Opathos, I think. But I loved that whole series.
Right. Yeah.
Patmos, yeah. But yeah, are the Residents like interested in revisiting Moles, American composers, Bunny Boy, any of the older stuff?
The only thing that I can think of that might take root with that, there's been some conversations recently about some of the uh, American composer stuff, and there was a one of the titles, or one of the suggested releases was The Trouble with Harry's. And The Trouble with Harry's was, the whole thing with the American Composer Series was you're kind of juxtaposing one composer against the other. And so the 2 composers that they wanted to use were Harry Nilsson and Harry Parch. And the idea has come up recently again about potentially revisiting that. But honestly, these kind of things come up in conversation all the time, and not that many of them ever come out. So I wouldn't be too optimistic, but it could happen.
Yeah, a couple people have mentioned first like a Tweedles stage show, Do you want to comment on that?
Well, there's been talk of a Tweedle's stage show, and personally, I think Tweedle's Tweedle's could make a great uh, kind of one man show with maybe a few more people around the edges, but still, um, yeah, there's been conversations around that for sure, and it's something I would love to see happen.
A couple other questions. Collaboration with David Lynch. Did that ever actually happen? And is there still a possibility of that?
I would say any possibility at this point is extremely remote. There were a couple of meetings with David um, back around the mid '90s, something like that. And at one point, he was considering Bad Day on the Midway as source material for his follow-up to Twin Peaks. And so the residents met with him about that, and he even optioned it. He optioned. He had 2 6-month options, um, but the problem was, for whatever reason, David never could come up with a concept which would enable that idea to become a long running series. Um, and then after 2 option periods, that was kind of the end of it. I mean, the the irony of that is not long after that, we were approached by somebody who was doing Saturday morning cartoons, and they had a production company and were really interested in working with the residents, and they wanted to option uh, Bad Day on the Midway, and they had the concept. What they wanted to do was a series, but the entire series would last for one day. So it would be like a half hour, animated, and then probably focus on one different character, for each week. I met with those people a couple of times, and I thought those were great ideas. And then all of a sudden, they're the guy who ran their studio, not the ones that we were talking to, the guy who ran the studio all of a sudden had interest from somebody to do an animated Saturday morning version of Starship Troopers. And that was the end of that conversation.
Wow. Stacy S here. She said she's been listening to the residents. I can't find her original comment, but listening her whole life, I think, and extremely moved by the residents' art and music. Stacy said, she says, a very important and influential part of my life. Without them, I wouldn't be doing my own animation and performance art. And she had a question. Were the residents ever interested in making an animated film or providing voices in shows or games? She knew you guys did work with Rosto, rest in peace, on the Monster of Nyx, which was great. There's a lot of questions in here about more visual film type work.
Well, they would love to do that stuff. I mean, they would still love to go back, and they feel like Bad Day on the Midway is just sitting there waiting to be explored and turned into something. But I mean, the problem is you have to find somebody with deep pockets and not only the money to do it, but one of the things that we've discovered is you need somebody that has the connections to get your stuff out there and get it distributed and get it in festivals and one thing after another. And sadly, the Cryptic Corporation is not capable of doing that. If anybody has any connections to people that love to talk, we'd love to talk to them.
You mean you're not just rolling in millions of dollars?
No,
Cryptic Corp?
no.
Aaron, I'm curious, this guy Miguel in the chat is asking about the CD-ROMs and if there's a playable version. I know you've got some screenshots in the book. Curious where you got them. And then secondly, I went to archive.org one time and at least Freak Show was available to play in an emulator in a web browser. So I don't know if you knew about that, or, I'd love to hear how you got into the CD-ROM era and what you did for the book stuff.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think it was Freak Show that's on the Internet Archive. That is where I got my screen captures from that one. And then for for the other, had to download an old Mac emulator, and then I can't remember where I got the CD-ROM files, but it was, you know, it was somewhere online. Someone had posted them illegally or whatever, but I downloaded them, of course, for educational purposes, and plugged it into the emulator and got my screen captures that way.
That's cool. We are over time, so if either of you guys got to go, feel free. Otherwise, we've got a few more questions in the chat if you don't mind hanging around either.
Yeah, at this point I could interject. There is a website of Bad Day on the Midway at this point, that where you can play it on the internet, and that it's called Wegner Online, WEGNERONLINE, WegnerOnline.com/bad day, BADDAY /index.html. And I haven't done it for a while, but I'm looking at it right now, and I think you can, it's playable there at this point.
Wow, that's great.
It's a labor of love. It's been on there. It's been up for a couple of years, something like that.
Oh, cool. Thomas Spica, apologies if I'm saying that wrong, asks Homer, how did the group handle creative differences in the El Ralpho days?
Well, creative differences are always tricky, but the residents are also collaborators, and there are kind of two ways that they would deal with things. Either they would come to some kind of compromise, but if the clash was too heavy, well, then they would just wind up dropping the project.
Interesting. Is that kind of what happened with I Murdered Mommy? Like, what happened there? And did it get to a playable demo point or anything?
No, it didn't. What happened was basically it was just the company went out of business. It was called Inscape was the company, and Inscape put out Bad Day on the Midway, and there were great hopes there at one point. Inscape was half owned by Warner Music and half owned by HBO. And HBO was putting money into it because they were hoping that TV series ideas would come out of it. And I think it was somebody at HBO that connected, HBO that connected them with David Lynch. But ultimately, when the market for that dried up, vanished, almost overnight, well, the company was out of business shortly after that, and so there was no more money to put into the project.
So creative differences and money, the two biggest things that stunt what happens.
Yeah, right.
Boreal Squid asks, what are your thoughts on the creative roots of Freak Show? Also, if the residents ever think about revisiting it, I would love some more light shed on characters like Benny, Mickey, and Text.
Well, the residents are from, North Louisiana. Okay, the Louisiana State Fair happened, I think, October in Shreveport every year, and the residents love going to the freak show, and I know that there were certain freaks, shall we say, disabled people, whatever, whose presence burned very deeply into the residents' consciousness. There was a woman named Grace McDaniel, and I've heard them tell this story many times. Grace McDaniel was known as the mule-faced woman. Okay, and if you're on the Midway, you go by the freak show, there are all of these huge, gigantic banners that are so crazy and wacky and stylized, and there's the mule-faced woman. It's a woman with the head of a mule. I mean, who wouldn't want to see that? So they wind up going in, and Grace eventually comes out, and what you have is this kind of incredibly pathetic middle-aged woman with folds of skin that hang down from her face, down like that. And I mean, just incredibly pathetic. And they wound up feeling dirty for having paid money to go in and gawk at this person. But the lesson that they learned, there is a concept, in Hinduism, I think, called Maya. And Maya is the difference between reality and perception. And what they felt like was that this was the greatest example of Maya that they could ever be given, and what you have is perception and imagination on the outside with the painting of the mule-faced woman, and then you have reality on the inside, and the gulf, the space between that. This is where the residents live. This is their bread and butter.
That is wild. That does explain a lot of things, like the Trainwreck album, and I know that the residents go deep into the darkness, like find the terror, but also the humanity. That's one thing that I appreciate about the residents.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll only do a couple more questions because I don't want this to be forever, but I would be remiss to ask about Animal Lover. That is my favorite Residents album. I think it's the most musical album, musically amazing too. Not just like, I know that you've said the Residents were never really great musicians, but man, that album is, I just listened to it last week. It is an incredible amalgamation of great songwriting, great musical performance, scary content. Like everything the Residents do, I feel like that album was like such a pinnacle. I'd love to hear, I don't know, some thoughts on Animal Lover, Homer.
Well, that was right around the time of, the 9/11. Yeah. And the Residents were on tour when that happened. And they were in Hamburg, Germany, had a show to do that night, and were at the club in Hamburg watching the Twin Towers go up in flames. And it was, needless to say, it was just a really, it was a weird thing for everybody at that time. But the Residents, well, I don't think they were even halfway into their tour, and they didn't want to cancel the tour, but then hardly anybody was coming to the shows. It was just all very weird. And in some ways, I think Animal Lover was their answer in a way to 9/11. That was their inspiration, for want of a better word. It was certainly the thing that stimulated them for that.
Very cool. Okay, so a couple people have asked about God in Three Persons, like how you felt about it, seeing it actually happen. And I know I just saw last night MVD has a Blu-ray of the performance, I believe. And so, someone's asking if there's ever going to be a Mole Show reproduction or a video of it. I think there's just a lot of demand for long-form video of the amazing shows that the residents have put out there. So I don't know, just kind of thoughts on that.
Well, unfortunately, particularly the older stuff, there really wasn't a lot of video shot of it. There was a really wacky version of Mole Show that was shot in Madrid, and it actually went out live.
Like of
and
the residents performing it?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. But what happened was that if you remember, or if the Mole Show is explained to the audience by Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller. And so there was a rehearsal of that live broadcast in the afternoon. And shortly after that happened, Penn had to go to the hospital. He had appendicitis and had to have his appendix removed. So it's like, here's the thing ready to go on. And the guy who's the focal point of the thing, the guy who is a great talker and can explain the thing from all kinds of different points of view and whatever, he's in the hospital. So ultimately, there was another guy, Lawrence, who was the Lawrence Kempling, who was the stage manager for that show. And Lawrence was something of an actor. And so he ultimately read Penn's part from a script. So at least that section got filled in. But he was a nice guy, but he was not Penn Jillette. And the whole thing in a way kind of lost its focus and lost a certain energy because of that. But there was, I don't know whatever happened to it. There was a 2-inch tape of that around here somewhere for a long time, but I think maybe it's disappeared by now.
All right, Aaron, we've kind of steamrolled you and the book. I hope you don't mind here. But, tell people about the book, where to get it, if there are copies left, especially the deluxe edition with the UWeb book and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the book, obviously a pictorial history. It's just 4 pages shy of being 400 pages. Comes with an unreleased track on 7-inch in the back, and pretty massive. And yeah, there's still copies available at melodicvirtue.com, or if you prefer to buy them in stores, you can always have your store request one, because we do sell to some stores like Rough Trade and Amoeba and all the good ones.
And if you're not aware, the book comes with a vinyl in the back. That'll Be the Day. Baby Baby. I thought it was that was just the name of a song, but it's really like 2 pieces of music. The most cacophonous version of That'll Be the Day, the Buddy Holly song, ever recorded. I was listening to it, actually at first I had it on 33 RPM and it was like really scary. Then I put it on 45 and oh my goodness, it's unbelievable that there's a melody over this sort of backing track. It's amazing. But yeah, the special edition, are there copies left?
Yeah, there are still copies left, and it does come with that UWeb book, which compiles every single UWeb newsletter that ever came out.
And that book is
And-
also beautiful. Really nice work.
oh, thank you. And it was a bit tricky because not all the UWeb newsletters were the same size.
Why
So
should
some
they
had to
be?
be right. Some had to be reconfigured a little bit.
Yeah, and UWeb is Uncle Willie's eyeball buddies, right?
Correct.
Indeed. Right.
Awesome.
That was Resident's first fan club.
That's fantastic. And then they're all hand numbered. There are 2,000 copies ever. So just like Homer has boxes and boxes of Resident stuff in his house, I'm sure Aaron has boxes and boxes of 4-pound books. But they are excellent, excellent collector's items. My book was $100, my Failure to Fracture book, and I feel like that was an incredible project just artistically from my friend Dave. And this book is like, it outdoes that, and it's cheaper. So you should go buy this book if you are into weird music and art collecting. And really, Aaron, you did an incredible job on the visual aspects of this book. Really nice.
Yeah, you
Well,
did.
thanks so much.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah,
Well,
Homer.
thank you. And
Please
it's
shower praise on Aaron, Homer.
Yeah, no, it's a genuine labor of love. I mean, as a graphic artist myself, I can look through both of those books and I just go, oh my God. I mean, it's so much work and so much beautiful work. Really, just being really excellent.
well, thank you.
Absolutely.
And it's so much easier when the source material's great.
Yeah, and you've got a Butthole Surfer's book and a Cardiac's book, right, in the works?
Uh, yeah, Butthole Surfer's book has been out since 2019, but put it into paperback a year or so ago. I think we're down to 40 something copies left of that one. And then, yeah, I've been flying to the UK over and over again, compiling stuff for the next book, Cardiacs.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your questions in the chat. Thank you for watching. Go to melodicvirtue.com. There's no funny spelling. It's melodicvirtue.com, and you can buy these books, and they are excellent, and they are worth looking through many, many times. I keep finding new stuff, even in volume 1, after flipping through it so many times. Homer, Aaron, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Us.
Yeah. And great to see you again, Eric.
Yeah, likewise, Homer.